Robin, you were just gonna say something about how Sasha, you had learned something new about
Yeah.
him, and I wonder if you can share your thoughts.
Well, hearing the history and Paul taking us through his training and being at UC Berkeley and so that it just dawned on me, sure he was a renegade chemist in a sense, but was he though? He was an academic, um, doing following a classic path, a scholarly path.
Hmm.
And then moving into industry, and again it's very mainstream, um, and I hadn't appreciated that. I sort of saw Sasha as this funky, almost countercultural figure. Obviously the huge impact on culture with the compounds he made, but I haven't appreciated his scholarliness and that formal academic background. And so that was an eye-opener. Yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, he taught at UCSF.
Mm.
He taught at UC Berkeley and has an incredible background of academia. I was told a story recently about another chemist whose name I will not name, but who said Sasha was more of a shaman than a scientist. And I was laughing about this with Ann's daughter Wendy, because she said, no. He, first of all, would not want to be characterized as a shaman at all. He was such an academic and such a rigorous scientist, but he was a genius. And he had this way of working with molecules that other people did not understand. Similarly, I was listening to you speak a bit about the your hypothesis of entropy, and I thought that was so interesting. I wonder if you can just tell me a little bit about what brought you to form that hypothesis.
Yeah, I think some of it's like it's sort of imagination really from the phenomenology. And then I didn't have a formal training in physics, but there are as there are naturally sort of, that there's a sort of pop science understanding. I enjoyed physics at school, but yeah, I didn't do it at what in the UK would be A levels before college. But I knew that there was this idea of a spectrum of order to chaos, and that there's this entropy thing, and broadly speaking, that's related to more chaos, more disorder. And so I was just thinking from the phenomenology to what might be going on in the brain. That was part of it, if I'm honest. There was some creative freedom there in thinking what might be going on, and just sort of using intuition from the phenomenology of a psychedelic experience. But all the time wondering what's in the black box, that being the brain and brain activity. And so thinking what would be the quality of brain activity that would give us a bridge here. And that's what drew me to entropy. But there was also, it wasn't just imagination, it was also, running brain imaging work, fMRI work early on.
Right.
With psilocybin, that was the first psychedelic we looked at. And seeing changes in brain blood flow actually initially that we didn't really understand. I'm not sure we still really understand it, or anyone does, but we're looking for a model. I'm looking for a model to make sense of things. We see these drops in blood flow, and they're in quite strategic places in the brain, it seems. It's not everywhere. There are big blobs in the middle, in the thalamus, big blobs in the midline, and then I'm learning that these blobs correspond with regions that are part of this system known as the default mode network. And I'm learning about how the system seems to be really important. It's ordinarily hyper perfused, and it has a high level of sort of basal or resting metabolism. So I kind of put two and two together, and I'm not sure that it's even a right connection, but it was that, oh, okay, so if these regions are ordinarily heavily perfused with blood, and we're seeing drops in blood, is that like an evening out? Is it like a sort of movement towards some kind of balanced equilibrium? And then I was intrigued whether that might relate to the entropy thing in the context of how like an ice cube melts and that's entropy increasing, and this is a basic law of the universe that
right, increased chaos, right?
yeah, the second law of thermodynamics, that things tend towards spread outness, or they say more disorder, but it's the breakdown of order, and that happens if things aren't being driven into order. And so I wondered whether that's what was going on, and then we did more brain imaging, and we see changes in the quality of brain activity. We see brain networks becoming less ordered under psychedelics, like the default mode network. Then they're less synchronous under psilocybin. And we use other brain imaging modalities like magnetoencephalography that looks at oscillating electrical activity in the brain, looks at brain rhythms that are quite fast, and we see with that these rhythms break down. So again, another desynchrony.
Right.
This desynchrony is happening again in the same regions. These regions of the default mode network. So I started to put the pieces together, and I was like, I think there's a general principle here, and it is that brain function is getting less ordered.
Right.
And I'll call it the entropic brain. And that was a lunch conversation with a colleague, and I was saying it's this entropy thing, and he was like, oh, the entropic brain. And I was like, oh, thanks, I'll use that.
Thanks, I'll use that. That's great.
I acknowledge him, but it's called Robert Leach, and he's a cognitive neuroscientist. And but yeah, he gave me the name.
I love it. I mean, it's fascinating following it from the phenomenology, right? I mean, you think about the first time you enter a room or drive through a beautiful place, and you're taking it all in. You're looking. I used to drive down to Big Sur all the time, and gorgeous, I'd stop and just take it in because it was so new and inspiring, and it was all I could think about. And then as I drove it every day, you stop looking around, you are seeing it, but you're not taking in. It becomes habitual. It's no longer activating my curiosity and my awe as much anyway, because I'm so used to it, right? It's become habitual.
Yeah.
And so I remember listening to you talk about this, and I was like, it follows so heavily, right?
Yeah.
The what lights you up and activates you, and that is what psychedelics do.
Yeah. It's the shades of the prison house, that begin to close upon the growing boy, that's William Wordsworth. And it's like that, the awe of the vastness of, these spaces, driving to Big Sur and the wow and the novelty starts to become, oh, I'm doing the drive again, and I know that there's this big space, and so you've got a mental model that begins to close on the raw experience.
Right.
It's kind of tragic, and that's why the poets, the romantics, said that heaven lies about us in our infancy, because it's raw experience. Pure consciousness, perhaps. And one of is it a tragedy? I don't know. It's bittersweet, but it's a thing that happens as we age. That extra magic seems to go a little bit, and there is a kind of melancholy to that, I think. Maybe psychedelics can bring it back.
Right. Well, I think that's part of it, right? Is that returning to the beginner's mind, and we work through that in meditative processes. There's all these different ways we aim to retain or regain that sense of awe. But anyways, thank you for kind of walking us through. I was curious where it came from, and really interesting to see how it continues to impact your work and the work of other people. I want to turn to, we've got some questions for you that we've been working on. And again, thank you so much for being here. It's just, I'm really excited to, bring you into our Shulgin community. And so, some of the things that we think about here, as you were just noting about, Sasha's academic rigor and kind of, I think it's a misunderstanding about his like mythos, right? And the psychedelic environment in the way that, Sasha has been portrayed to misunderstand. So it's not uncommon to misunderstand his academic rigor. And, the two of them, Ann and Sasha, both approached these psychoactive compounds with really careful chemistry, gradual dose exploration, and meticulous first-person reporting of the physical, emotional, and perceptual effects. And I wonder how in your work, how important is subjective experience as scientific data, and how could or should the field measure it more rigorously?
Yeah. Well, it's centrally important. It's probably bottom line. I would describe my approach to this question of, say, how are these drugs working, would be aligned with a philosophy called dual aspect monism. That's a bit of jargon, but what's it mean? It's essentially our mind and brain are two sides of the same coin, and we're at any one time we're looking at one side. And it's the same coin, but when we come in and have a look, it's just, are we looking at the phenomenology or are we looking at the biology? And the question for me would be, well, what's the mapping? These things interrelate, and there's no magic in a supernatural sense. So there must be a code, like a cipher, like hieroglyphics. It's like, this must mean something. The brain activity, and equally the experience must be encoded in the biology. It's not apart from it. It might be wildly complex and relational, but it's still encoded. It's still here, and there must be an encoding of it. So that's always been the quest, is like, how can we crack the code? And it's really hard because I didn't realize that we're limited by, our tools and the resolution of our tools. And the tools, in a sense, like a telescope, can only see so far, and they're improving, just like new telescopes get more advanced and then they can see further into the universe and so on. But there's still constraints in terms of how far you can see, based on physics and stuff. But I think that's been a learning, is like, the limits of the resolution of the tool. So, whether it's an fMRI scan or a EEG recording, you're always in some kind of bounded limited space. But you can still get stuff that maps, that correlates. And I think that realization is really important as well, that we're mapping. It's a mapping endeavor, that maps aren't the territory. And so when the question is, how important is subjective experience, I'm inclined to say, well, that's the territory.
Right.
Like, that's the bottom line. And what we're now wanting to work out is, how can we create a map that provides some useful coordinates that would bridge to the territory in a way that isn't overly simplistic or overly complex, such that it starts to make the map sort of redundant. It's not a map anymore.
Sure.
I mean, a map is a simplification of the thing it's meant to represent, and it's a representation. So the key question would be, what are the meaningful bits of biological, physiological activity that meaningfully map to the territory, the subjective experience?
Right.
Essentially important.
And then there's also the risk that's run anytime we're studying anything, of discarding outliers, right? And kind of like, so I imagine with the subjective experience, that's even maybe more complicated because of people's experiences being so varied.
Yeah, but there's also, I mean, there's useful variance there. Why is it that people's experiences differ? What is there in the biology that can account for that? What is there in the context that can account for that? What is there in their psychology that can account for that? So that those become interesting questions. But also, what is there on average across people that's quite consistent, that's sufficiently reliable, such that when any of us talk about an MDMA experience,
right,
we're kind of smiling,
some
being like, yeah, it's that thing, isn't it? And, you know, isn't it special or whatever? And there's a connection on that level is because there is a commonality.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, actually, it's interesting you brought up context, because I think that, you know, it's an interesting piece that we have this really rich history of consistent psychedelic experience here at this site, right? And the way that the Shulgin's bioassay, and particularly Sasha for much longer, and then Ann when they partnered, you know, testing these substances on themselves and testing them on groups of people in this, you know, farm setting, you know, where they were outdoors or they were indoors. They could be in a cuddle puddle, they might be in the lab, they could be anywhere on property. And so it's an interesting broad setting. And yet they were also, you know, very careful about, you know, setting that tone with the group. And I know that your lab is now studying the context of psychedelic experiences more directly, as you were mentioning. And so I wondered if you could share how you are measuring context in psychedelic experiences, and also what you think modern psychedelic science is learning about the role of context in therapeutic outcomes.
Well, it's been a principle for so long in psychedelic medicine that these are context-dependent medicines, and I mean we could go to the 60s and Leary and Metzner and you know the coining, I think, of set and setting, certainly in the context of psychedelics, and then the emphasis being laid there on its critical importance. And that's been a staple, you know, in the psychotherapeutic application, and so yeah, it's a job of people like me to kind of keep rehearsing that principle
and pushing the edges,
and also properly testing it. And that's the thing, is that many people would think, well, that it's a given. It has been properly tested, hasn't it? And then it's a bit of a wake-up call to say, well, not really, actually, and then ask the question, well, what's required to properly test this thing? And so that's what we're doing. It's like breaking it down to its most basic level. And so what is that? And it's the question. Under a psychedelic, in this case it's psilocybin, does context matter more? Or I could put it another way as a hypothesis, like a statement: context should matter more under a psychedelic. And so that's the test. So then how do you test it? Well, you need to control context and have a couple of versions of it. I mean, you could have endless versions, but let's keep it simple. To get at the basic principles, the first principles, and so we break it down into two levels. And people won't like that, you know. Say from the culture, that they'll say that's clunky. You know, what do you have and what do you not have? And so to lay that out again in just simple terms, in one of the levels or versions, we don't have music. They're in a research room, as a clinical research unit, and in a room that to most people's eyes would look good, would look quite new and modern, very clinical, very clean, but we don't decorate it. So the bright fluorescent lighting is on, you can dim it. And that was a request. It was like, and this is it's a fine line. This whole study is really walking a tightrope, I would say. It's not without risk, but sometimes science has to do those somewhat risky studies to test key principles.
That's right.
And that might be one of the reasons why this hasn't been properly tested yet. And by
that you mean like concern that someone's trip might go in a
is this safe enough? Can you do that? You know, so 2008, it looks as though human psychedelic research could enter something like a renaissance. And Matt Johnson and Roland Griffiths publish, and not just them, Bill Richards, I think, Mary Cossimano is part of this team at Johns Hopkins, saying, you know, these are the guidelines for safe human psychedelic research. And it's laying out set and setting and saying, you've got to have these pieces in place, really. But then that doesn't give you room to test our assumptions about set and setting. So it's a really useful piece that rightly has been heavily cited. But you know, what would it mean to actually not have those elements? Like unless we remove them, we won't know what would happen.
That's right.
And so it has been this very delicate dance of removing elements, but having a safety protocol around the removal of those elements. So you can give a high dose of psilocybin and no music, be in a clinical room with the lights on, and what about people's manner critically? Like, how are they being held there? So there isn't the same psychological support. There isn't a psychotherapeutic or psychotherapy-like manner with people. It's more of a general friendly manner, but not in any way sort of actively guiding. It's more like holding space and monitoring basic safety.
Monitoring, right? Yeah.
So the prep becomes more like a briefing, and the integration becomes more like a debriefing. And the care or guidance that you would have in psychedelic therapy is more like safety monitoring. So it does naturally raise these questions. Well, can you do that? But I guess what is happening is that we're realizing how we were fish in water that didn't realize we were in water, and that we were doing this thing because we believe that it's the best practice, but we haven't tested its influence.
Right, we're not sure what the water actually is composed of.
So that's what we're doing, and so...
Fascinating. I can also see how it could be controversial. And
it is in the team, because none of us want to do harm.
Right.
And we've got, you know, a mix of scientists and clinicians like signing up to the ethos of do no harm.
Right.
Rightly so. And so we're working out how can we do this science while still doing no harm. And it's been a learning curve. We have a bunch of safety protocols for how we would deal with any emergencies, psychological emergencies, how we would pivot into something more supportive. And we have those in place. So the study would test both the hypothesis but also the feasibility of what we're doing, which then has implications for the feasibility of whether you can do this at all, as in dose people with a high dose of psychedelic and not attend in the usual way to set and setting.
Right. Well, and this is really important right now. I mean, there's, it's with so many different psychedelics in the FDA pipeline, and many of them leaning heavily away from offering anything other than monitoring. I think it's often called psychedelic monitoring now, as opposed to, even though it's being held by a psychotherapist or it's someone who can support an emergency, but they're offering less. And so I think studies like this are so critical to help inform those practices even further as well. And also to really understand, like, what are the limits? Like, really, what are the boundaries of the healing that's possible, given these various ways of being supported and the environments that you're in. So important.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, there's so many tensions in the space, and but I think it is that, we can have an idealism around what would be ideal for an individual going through psychedelic therapy, and then we hit the real world, and the
That's
rubber
right.
hits the road, and reality bites, and commercial pressures come in, especially in the system that we live in. In any system, you have a limited budget, and so you have these questions around cost effectiveness, scalability. Is this something that everyone can have, or actually is there an affordability barrier? This sounds like a lot of psychotherapy. Psychotherapy is expensive. Will this be a private thing? Oh no, this will actually be part of the industrial healthcare system. And so how's that going to work? And so we're actually testing things that will have a bearing on the feasibility of the scale up.
Yes.
From a position of set and setting matters. I mean, that is the hypothesis. I'll be surprised if we find anything different. But all the same, you've got to run the science.
That's right.
I can't say. I mean, we're a third of the way through the study, and we've learned that it is so far so good. I would say it's feasible, just about. There are risks. All studies have risks, and there are certain maybe special risks in the study, and so we've learned how to hold the line. And it's been challenging, but so far so good. But yeah, I mean, in a system that will want to drive down cost,
Right.
to drive up return, how is that feasible at all? So we could provide results that are bad news for the scale up of industrial psychedelic medicine. And it's like, no, there's just a safe limit here, and you can't go under it. Otherwise, the whole ratio of harm to benefit changes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is the whole thing, we can't be so idealistic that this, be something that is exclusive and only for the wealthy, say. Or at the other extreme, it can't be so dialed down and that it's actually not safe anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I also think, first of all, I want to just offer your appreciation for taking on this question, because in part, in 2008, let's use that example. I mean, Roland Griffiths and Mary and that wonderful team did not come to that from nowhere, right? Yeah. And so there has been so much work in this area already, and so many decades of people working this problem and this question and coming to these things. And yet, in order to move it through the FDA approvals, and in order for people in modern, medical investing, et cetera, to really understand those limits, this is the language they need. The study that you're doing helps to provide that understanding in modern language that has been proven recently. And so that makes it even more important and precious. We're really interested as a foundation, the Shulgin Foundation is interested in preserving psychedelic history while supporting a more responsible future for the field, which is really what we're talking about in your study. And so as psychedelic research becomes more medicalized and commercialized, what knowledge, values, or practices do you think we need most to preserve?
Well, there's a rich understanding of psychedelic medicine that some people have, and the psychedelic community has that. There's also a scientific version of that is sort of adjacent to and can be part of the psychedelic community that's more cultural. So there's like a know-how that we can have in the space, and historically, given the legality, the regulatory situation, it has been quite a niche space, and so here we're at this turning point where the whole world, this is opening up as a legal treatment option, or even just an experience that you can have in certain states right now. I mean, that already exists, thankfully. What is the basic level of understanding and education that people need coming into this? Because it's easy just to be really naive and walk into a bit of a trap. Not a trap, but like walk into a hole and get injured or worse. And it can happen. And the drugs are incredibly potent. I'm not sure people understand that. I mean, when I turned on to psychedelics, it almost sounded cartoonish.
Right.
Like, it sounded like I might see some little green men run across the table or whatever, and wouldn't that be funny and fun? And then I was hit with a big dose of LSD, and I think I'm in hell, and I must have died to be in this state of consciousness, because it was so profoundly other that I just didn't have any coordinates. So just naturally catastrophized but it took many years of sort of effort to understand what the hell happened there, to realize what it was. And of course that's led to where I am today in terms of wanting to understand, so learning psychology and then the neuroscience and so on. So I think that's taken me, I was 14 when I first took LSD. I'm in my mid-40s now, so that's 30 years of understanding. But I could still take a psychedelic today and start doubting whether am I a scientist, or what. It's all those things, they just break down. And that's with 30 years of education to become like, this is my profession. So I think to have some ability to make sense of what is often the strangest experience of your life is going to be essentially important for, yes, safety, basic safety, but also understanding how to benefit most from this. So I'm in the business of education in a sense as an academic, but I can't help but feel that is so critically important. And you often hear it said in the context of drugs and drug harms, like education. You're like, yeah, it's like a cliche, or it's overused. But actually it is that. It's the understanding, even when it's applied therapeutically, so more medicinal, it's still based on evidence, and so it's still this epistemic thing. It's like still knowledge based,
right?
For the medicine to work best and to work right. So it's core, yeah.
Yeah, that I think we really hit it. It's, as a psychedelic community and people who have a lot of experience with psychedelics, and now there's there's a huge another ring and layer of people who are becoming interested in participating and who are participating. And it's that question of, how do we take that communal knowledge built from decades of experience and our elders and scientists and everybody creating this community, and help to bring that to the public in new ways, in ways that are digestible and that aren't selling anything, except that this is the base layer of knowledge that you need. It's something we're really interested in at the foundation as well, is how do we use the understanding and education and academic rigor, the platform that Ann and Sasha, essentially who they were, and utilize that space to become a voice for people who are seeking, who are interested and want knowledge, and not just the kind that you might find on social media or that you might find in an academic class or setting.
Yeah.
Because there's so many nuances. It's like you need that voice generated from a really reliable source.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the thrill of all this, is that, you know, psychedelics are meaningful at so many different levels. Whether it's, you know, low-level chemistry, you know, what Sasha excelled at, but also, you know, I mean, we can move up levels to okay, so now we're in a neurophysiology level, or a level where you could use brain imaging to map brain activity, and then you can move up to the phenomenology and the psychology and the therapeutic side of it. But there's also the cultural side, the art, and so it's just a naturally, like, unusually, I think, it's exceptionally rich space. So there's so much that people could learn and benefit from. And I think that kind of stamp of authority that can come from the foundation, I'd like to think also from a scientist, contemporary scientist in this space, like myself, is really critical. Like, this is a voice from a place of some authority.
That's right.
And you know, what are in a sense the experts telling me, and I think it's so critical that those voices are saying, well, there is a way to do this, and that not get lost in the current culture that we live in, where nuance so often gets lost. And it is a system that sells as well. So how much can I trust this authority?
That's right.
Is this individual selling me something? What's their motivation? I think people think that I'm motivated by some kind of like financial return through psychedelic medicine doing well.
They've never raised money for a project, obviously.
Yeah, or understood how hard it is to get any kind of funding to do this kind of research. Yet they think it's all driven by some kind of conflict of interest, or I'm in bed with some psychedelic medicine company. And so that's a thing as well. It's helping to explain that it's not that. And yeah, I've wondered about that, the companies that I have advised for. I wonder how they think when I'm making statements or putting out papers on, say, harms. And I feel like I'm on a quest of inquiry, and it's a bit lofty, but like truth-telling. And then you see that there's a tension there, because their agenda is to sell and market. So to do a setting study that might expose that, like, it's really not safe to even take away some music.
It's really bold what you're doing, especially in the face of all of that.
I think it's essential, really. It is sort of first principle stuff. And I get it that people would think, well, yeah, obviously setting matters. Do you really need to do some science to demonstrate the bloody obvious, as we would say in England? And actually, yes, you do, because you know, people come in and they say, well, where's the science for this? Or there isn't any. Well, how do we know we can't just give the drug? It's like, yeah, you know, good luck with that.
Yeah, let's test this theory.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love it.